I'm Brian Green. I'm the Senior Advisor for Chapter 1163. Today I'm joined by retired Chief Master Sergeant Lakovic. We're wrapping up this week's legislative week. We've asked you a handful of questions. We got one more we want to tee up for you and hopefully have a quick conversation about it. Now that people have heard about what AFSA legislation does, how can military members and veterans get involved to make sure their voices are heard on Capitol Hill?
Several different ways. One certainly is to make it a point as a citizen to communicate with your elected officials. You have every right to do so, although some suggest as military members you can't do that. That's not true. There is a DOD regulation that clearly spells out things you can and can't do in uniform. But there is no regulation, no AFI, or instruction that in any way usurps your right as a citizen to communicate with your elected officials about any subject. And you have a right to do that. In fact, a few years ago, when they were trying to get rid of the A-10, for example, a fairly high-level military member told an audience of airmen, don't say anything to your elected officials about keeping the A-10, because at that time the Air Force was somehow word get out on the streets on that. It actually got into the media, and that high-ranking military member actually retired not long after that. One of those kind of, and you know, and the only point I'm making is that was illegal to do that. Right. You have every right to communicate with your elected officials, and you need to. On important issues, especially when we're getting close to fruition of success on an issue, there will be times, for example, that our headquarters will reach out to all 125 chapters and say, now is time to send a letter on the Richard Starr Act or whatever the particular piece of legislation is. And here's a pre-written letter. And AFSA has invested in a program called Voter Voice. And that's presented to our members on the AFSA website. And you can take those pre-written letters and you can put in your voting information for where you actually vote. If you vote absentee, you want to reflect that area because those are your employees answerable to you. And then you just hit send and you have just sent a perfectly formatted letter to your elected officials. Important to do that. Also important to do, whether it's on an issue or not, this January, you need to communicate with your elected officials. All military members do, especially if you have a new member of Congress representing your district in the House where you vote, or one of your two senators from your state, if they have been replaced and you have new people. But I say every 2 years, at least write a letter to your elected officials, remind them that you're there, and you hope that they will act in the best interest of military people as far as quality of life benefit programs go. Keep in mind too that all the new members of Congress, our staff will be sitting down with. Big part of what we do as an association is educate the new members of Congress, only 17% of which ever served a day in a military uniform.
Wow.
Means 83% didn't. Another thing you need to do, month of August and a lot of holidays, they call it their August recess in August, they just finished with, where all the senators go back to their home states, the elected officials go back to their districts, and make it a point. They'll hold town hall meetings, make it a point to go to those meetings and bring up some of the issues that are on AFSA's legislative target list, our legislative platform, and urge their support. So that's another thing that you can do, another way to communicate. But and sometimes they'll have not just town hall meetings, they'll have certain events, or they'll do, I think here, don't they do one through the internet, or occasionally your congressman does that. So participate in those things, communicate, always mention AFSA, and mention that concurrent receipt, for example, for those rated 40% or below.
Right.
And urge their support. But if the headquarters calls for it, sometimes if we can get a push from the field, from all around the world, to the members of Congress at the same time that we're up there lobbying, it validates the things that we're saying, and it's going to enhance our chance of getting things signed into law.
Well, in the field is where the strength comes from, right?
It is.
That's the stick the lobbyist waves.
Those are the actual people being affected by the decisions that are being made by those elected officials.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. And there's a lot of power in it. I tell our members that they have an incredible amount of power and influence over their own careers if they participate, if they're members of AFSA and they participate in the communication effort.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a big difference.
Well, and I think too, on the website where they can find these letters to send to their representatives, is the same pathway to sign up to become a member. It's always good to reach out to your local chapter, but when in doubt, you can go on hqafsa.org, sign up to become a member, and I get those emails when the call comes out to the field, perfectly drafted letter, I review it, put my information on it, send it up.
Yeah, there's another thing too. A lot of our members do not have an email on file in their profile. And they do, but they're not receiving those twice weekly updates that the headquarters puts out called the military and government briefs. It's in those those reports that come out twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, that the headquarters will specifically call for action now and actually say, these are some of the campaigns we have, click here if you want to go to send a letter on this.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very important that you become citizen airmen or citizen guardians, or take that as an important part of being an adult in our nation and a productive citizen, that you're going to communicate with your elected officials. Because after all, those two senators and that district representative in the House are your employees. It's not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to tell them how to behave.
Right.
Because that's the best way that we're going to achieve success as an association. And one thing I do want to say also, and that is, having worked the Hill for many years when I did, I can tell you from personal experience that the larger our association is,
Mm-hmm.
the more influence we're going to have. The more doors are open to us, the more testimony opportunities and invitations we get where we actually testify before the congressional committees. The more ability we will have to get high-level meetings with the Speaker of the House and Chairman of the Armed Services Committee. A lot of the smaller associations ask for those and they're unable to get them. We are still of a size that we're still okay on that.
Mm-hmm.
However, we have well over 1 million. Now remember, all services, all ranks, current and past, can be members of AFSA, full members. So we're talking several million possible AFSA members, and we've really only scratched the surface.
Mm-hmm.
I wish, boy, if we had 1 million members, there's almost nothing that we couldn't push through, that needs to be pushed through on behalf of our members.
Right. And that's a key distinction. The Air Force Sergeants Association is not exclusive to Air Force sergeants. All DoD personnel, active guard, reserve,
All ranks.
All ranks. There's no
And
limitations.
their family members.
And everything the
And
organization
survivors.
does benefits that group of people.
They do.
We exist to serve, members.
And in
veterans.
reality, when we get a new benefit program pushed through, even if we do it for the Air Force, legislation doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's going to be in a DoD piece of legislation,
Mm-hmm.
where DoD is going to be told to do it. And it's almost always going to apply to all services, all ranks.
Right.
So if we get an increase in tuition assistance, they'll get it.
Right.
If we get a program of bereavement leave, which we just did,
Mm-hmm.
although we have work yet to do on it, then all services got it, even though we were pushing for it.
Yeah.
And because it was brought up as a suggestion through the Air Force members. And then you're right, that's an important distinction to make. Try to get as many people, try to grow your chapters, as big as you can,
Mm-hmm.
because it's in your own best interest. The bigger we are, the better we'll be able to protect you for the rest of your life and through your retirement, if you stay in till retirement, and even after you pass away, we're going to take care of your survivors.
Right. Well, Chief, I'd like to thank you for coming up, spending the day with us, recording a bunch of videos for us to put out this week. For folks that have questions, concerns, there'll be more information on our page. How to get involved, we'll link the AFSA website. I just really appreciate it, Chief, sharing this information in such a digestible way. You take legislation from how it's written to the common man. I really appreciate that translation.
Well, I am pretty common.
Thank you, Chief.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, buddy.